Okay. Welcome to the session of Kalpana Viswanath. She is from Delhi. Please meet our new speaker, creator of the Safety Pins experience in Delhi. Kalpana is a gender and urban expert from India. Welcome, Kalpana. And this is the forum Generation Equality. And now we're going to share the session with her. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here at the Forum Equality and share the experience of Safety Pin over the past 7 years. I will share my screen. So Safety Pin, it was a tool that was designed to really look at how to use technology as an enabler to build gender-friendly cities, gender-inclusive cities. We all know that the perception of unsafety restricts the full rights of women to the city. Women are unable to enjoy the benefits and the equality in a city to employment, to education, to leisure because of the fear and the perception that this city is unsafe. Therefore, what we need to do is really to build gender responsive cities, which moves beyond only a crime focused perspective, but also focuses on the right to the city, which includes infrastructure, services, as well as leisure. Also, to understand the impact of fear and violence on women's lives, on girls' lives, and how it prevents them from being equal citizens. And finally, we need all stakeholders in cities, whether in the government or in civil society, to focus on building a prevention and a culture of equity and exclusion. So this is the broad framework within which Safety Pin was designed. Now, Safety Pin is a mobile app and set of tools that are used to design safer public spaces for women, girls, and all those who are normally excluded from the process of urban planning and design. So the Safety Pin app, My Safety Pin app, has several features that can be useful for individual women when they're using on the street. So you can get a safety score, you can do a safety audit, or as well as find the safest route that can be used. So this is one of the tools that Safety Pin has. It is a free app called My Safety Pin, and anyone can download it and use it in their city. They can give data, input data about how they feel in the city, as well as see all the data and use it to make safer decisions. We also have other tools, other technology platforms that we use to collect data in public spaces to enable city governments and municipal governments and other stakeholders to make changes. So one is called Safety Pin Night. In Safety Pin Night, what we do is we collect images of the city as we move along in order to analyze and produce big data and large GIS layers of the city. What do we analyze these photographs on? On parameters of physical infrastructure, that is, whether there's enough lighting, whether the streets are open, whether it's a walkable street, whether there's public transport. But we also look at the social usage. So are there people on the streets? Are there, sidewalk cafes? Are there very high walls? Are there street vendors? Are there women on the streets? So we measure both these sets of parameters to come up with a safety audit and score. We also have another app called Safety Pin Site, which is a web application for collecting qualitative and spatial information through a questionnaire. So this could be around a metro station or a bus stop or a park and other public spaces that uh, women use. We have used it in India to collect data in public spaces around metros. We've used it in South Africa to look at the sort of the taxi rank areas where women face a lot of violence, where women have generated information and data, but what makes them feel unsafe and which parts, which times of the day they feel more unsafe and safe. So what we do with the data is all these different data that we collect, we process them using both machine learning as well as manual processing, and we produce citywide databases, which then can be used, if you can see at the bottom, both for individuals to take personal decisions, for websites and portals to use the safety score. For example, if you are wanting to maybe rent an accommodation, if you're going to a new restaurant in a new neighborhood, or you're going to a new city and you need to stay in a hotel, you might like to see the safety score of that area before you move ahead. And finally, we share this data with municipal governments as data, as GIS layers in order to influence city planning, service provision, and infrastructure to make cities safer and more inclusive for women and others to use. Safety Pin was started in 2013, so we're nearly more than 7 years old now. And we have data in now more than 60 cities across 15 countries. As you can see, there have been over 2 million images that we have generated, more than 500,000 audit pins. We also have more than 100,000 downloads and users of the My Safety Pin app. So I would really encourage all participants who are watching this to download the My Safety Pin app and see the data. So you can see that we have generated data in across India, of course, but in many other cities in Asia, as well as in Latin America in some cities and in Africa. So we really see this as a tool to be used to improve our cities and our public spaces. So what really do we think can be done through some of these measurements that we do? Because what we say is that if you can measure it, if you can provide evidence, if data can be used as evidence, that is something that can effect change in cities and really have an impact on the lives of women and girls. So some of the key parameters that we look at, as I mentioned earlier, was the lighting, the walkability of the streets, the natural surveillance. So by this I mean eyes on the street. So do you have, shops? Do you have cafes? Do you have low boundary walls? Do you have setbacks which distance the pedestrian from the street? Mobility elements such as good last mile connectivity, good public transport, as well as security. So what are the outcomes of these would be improved lighting, better sidewalks, improved last mile connectivity using IPT, better bus stops and metro stations where people feel safe using it all through the day, um, bicycle infrastructure, and enhanced security, both through CCTVs as well as other forms of physical security. And the impacts of these can be seen in improved walkability, better mobility and connectivity, a sense of safety. And what does this lead to eventually? It increases and improves women's access to public spaces, to opportunities such as education, employment, And it also increases their access to resources because when women feel unsafe, when women feel that they cannot walk on the streets, they tend to feel unsafe and they tend not to go out. Now, we know that through a lot of data that women often walk and use public transport more than men. This is linked to many issues, including the cost of travel. If you know, for example, if there's one car in the family, it's often used by the men and not by the women. So, improving walkability and improving public transport and connectivity has a very big impact on the lives of women. And so I would like to share some of the data that we've collected in different cities and how it has been used. So if you can see, this is the city of Delhi, and data was collected over 2 months using both the safety pin night for image collection as well as my safety pin, where users went out and did safety audits. Now, if you can see, there are um, some dark green, some light green, orange, and red. Now, this signifies the level of safety. So the red areas are poor safety, the orange areas are average, and the green areas are above average or good safety. So this data collection, we generated more than 100,000 images in Delhi, but we also did a specific focus on metro stations, bus stops, parks, and tourist areas in order to improve those areas specifically. One of the uses of our data has been for improving the lighting in the city. So this mapping that we did in 2018 was the second round of mapping that we had done. In 2016, we had already mapped the entire city and showed the government that there were more than 7,400 dark spots in the city. This data was used by the government, and all the lighting and municipal authorities used this data to actually fix many of the lights in the city. And as you will see, the number of dark spots actually came down to 2,700 dark spots in 2018. And you can see that new areas have been mapped. So of course, some of the dark spots remain, but this was a big change. And this new data from 2018 has subsequently also been used by the Delhi government to improve the lighting. And now they are working on improving walkability, creating walkable streets, addressing the issues of pedestrians, public transport. Delhi government has been one of the first few cities to provide free public transport for women in buses in order to encourage women's mobility. And the data that has been done to research this has found that, in fact, more than 30% increase in women's usage of buses has resulted due to this new provision provided by the city government, whereby women can travel free. Women who were earlier walking for up to 4 or 5 kilometers because of the cost of public transport were now able to access the bus. And this makes a very significant difference in the lives of women. Now, Safety Pin has worked in many cities other than Delhi as well. So in the city of Kolkata, which is also in East India, what we did was specifically try to map the walk path to look at accessibility, to see whether people can cross easily, whether they can walk, whether there are barriers on the street where it could be garbage, it could be street vendors, it could be car parking. In India, a lot of cars are parked in public spaces, especially on the sidewalks, and to improve the accessibility. So this was again used by the city government to actually try and see how to make it more walkable. Now, Kolkata is one of the cities in India which is already quite walkable. But if you see the legend of this map, you can see that there are still many points where there are blockages, which could be either light poles, encroachment, but mostly it is by cars. So this is really something that by good enforcement, public spaces can be improved. In one particular city, in one particular road in Kolkata, we provided a design intervention for improving it using a three-tier strategy. One was to remove all obstructions. Second was to repair. So if you look at this picture on your left, there are the sidewalk is there, but it's broken, and therefore people tend to walk on the streets. So to repair the broken sidewalk, add curb ramps, add median breaks, etc. And finally, to reclaim the street from the cars. And this is something we are seeing in many cities around the world, where a broad street which has been 2 lanes or 3 lanes for cars has been reclaimed for pedestrian usage as well as bicycling, also to slow down the streets and make them a wider usage by more pedestrians, more people using the street. Now, this street is being worked on by the city government. So really, our aim is to try and provide data that can be used specifically by city governments to improve public spaces. So if you look at this, this is a city in near Delhi, and we had a partnership with a leading newspaper where they printed very detailed story about our safety audits and the data that Safety Pin had generated and provided. And what we found that was we gave them this data that there are nearly 3,000 points in the city which had poor lighting. But they also asked us that, can you help us prioritize which areas to fix first? Because sometimes it's not possible to fix everything at the same time. So what we did was we actually filtered those areas where there was also a very high crowd. So at night, where a lot of people, including women, were using these places, we intersected that data with the poor lighting data, and we identified 630 specific spots which needed fixing. And so this was what was highlighted. And if you can see the picture, you can see that this had an impact because the same street on your left was now the sidewalk was fixed and made. The lights were fixed, as well as a walking infrastructure and bicycling infrastructure was introduced in order to make it more friendly. So, what we find that it is possible to use data for advocacy and building evidence, and that is something that city governments are able to respond to well. We also work with the community. So it's not just that we provide the data, from to the governments, but we also generate data. We also use this as a way to get young women, get women in communities to map their experience of cities, to feel empowered by the data that is generated, as well as help them use it for advocacy to improve their own neighborhoods. So one of the outcomes of our community level mapping was an exhibition that we had, which was in partnership with a women's organization in Delhi called Jagori and King's College London, to produce this exhibition called Annajana, which means coming and going, on the home, phone, and the city, to look at how digital infrastructure uh, plays a role in the lives of women, how they can use it to map their journeys, and they use Safety Pin as well as WhatsApp to map their journeys. And this image that you see is actually part of an exhibition that was put up in a very crowded metro station for 1 month last year. And this gave the women who collected this data, who were part of this initiative, also came to the station a couple of times to interact with the public to explain to them their journeys, their fears, their understanding of the city, their desires from the city, how they use the digital space, how they are intimidated by the digital space, how they use physical space as well as fearful of physical space. And so, really bringing together the digital and the physical today, which play a very important life in an important both women's ability to access opportunities as well as limiting their lives due to fear and due to lack of opportunities. So this is the process of collecting data at in the street level. Also, we have a tool called the Open Street Mapping, where we display the safety audit findings in public spaces, engage in advocacy, get community to be part of it, and use the data. Now, we've worked in many other countries as well. So in Colombo, which is the capital of Sri Lanka, we mapped the city, and you can see the five main districts were mapped to see the presence of women and men in which spaces. So if you can see one of the comments on the left by an app user, it was, the road does not have a walk path. It is bordered by two walls on both sides and there's no lighting. So what did we find here in Colombo? That there were less women who use public spaces after dark, and this is probably true of many, many cities around the world. Therefore, walkability needs upgradation, but also lighting and public transport, because even if a woman has to go back after using, maybe visiting a restaurant or going out with her friends or family, you need public transport to go back. You need to provide those service and resources for women to use. One project that we're doing in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, is to look at a new BRT route that is being built and to map women's accessibility to that particular bus route. Now, this is interesting because we are using both safety pin night to map the street, but also safety pin site to look at where each bus stop will come up and speak to possible users. In addition, we are also speaking to potential users of the BRT in this one area by going to the neighborhoods around there, both the low income and the middle income neighborhoods, talking to women, talking to people, and seeing what would be some of the barriers from them to access the bus stop, because we know that it's not just the bus stop or just the bus, it is the last mile connectivity. So is it a walking, if it's a walking route, then how safe is the walk? How can it be made safer for women to walk back in the evening? If it's a little longer than a walking route, what kind of IPT is being provided? You know, is there kind of electric vehicles that are there? What other options are there? Some buses which are there for women and others to use when walking back. Now, this data is being done in partnership with the World Bank and the city of Sao Paulo and the transport department, again, to use the data. So really, it's just what Safety Pin aims is to work with local communities, work with local stakeholders to see what kind of data is useful to make changes. Because at the end of the day, we produce data, we get women's perceptions and safety audits, not just to generate data in a vacuum, but really to say, how can it be used? One, by women to move around more safely, but more importantly, how do governments use this data to actually enhance women's access and right to the city? In Malaysia, in one of the cities, we did a mapping of 10 public spaces, really to look at who uses it, uh, what are some of the key elements about it. So we assessed how well it is to reach it, pedestrian crossing. Is it shading? Is there surveillance? Is there shade on the walk path? Because, you know, in cities which are warm, there it is difficult to use a walk path if it's very hot. So also what kind of shading? Is there any emergency assistance? Is it a diverse public space? Are there people from different age groups, different genders, different ethnicities, so that there's a sense that this is a shared space? You know, if it's a very male dominated space, we often find that women also feel uncomfortable using those spaces. Also to look at the vegetation and security and other things. Now, this was done in partnership with Think City Malaysia, which is a public policy research and think tank who works very closely with city governments and have done some very exciting projects about reclaiming, rejuvenation of um, public spaces in the city in order to make them accessible to people, because we are finding that as public spaces become unusable in cities, it also becomes more unsafe. It becomes criminal activities can take place there. But also, what happens is, the availability of good public spaces for families, for women, for children, for the elderly, for others becomes restricted, and therefore the quality of life goes down. So there are many linkages. It's also linked to the larger issue of climate. You know, most of our cities, especially the larger metro cities, are choked today with vehicles, with vehicular pollution, and we know that we need to address this. And we do find that there is a linkage between making public spaces safe and inclusive as a way of moving towards getting people to walk, to use bicycles, to use public spaces, and may encourage city governments to build cities which are, what they're calling 15-minute cities today, where, you can access most of your needs within 15 minutes of walking, so that there is less long distance transport and travel that is needed to be made by people in order to access spaces. The other very interesting project that we have done is in Bogota City. We've had a long-standing partnership with the Bogota City, and in 2014, they actually translated the app into Spanish. So after English, the first language that the app was available in was in Spanish. And the data was used, collected in the city by users using safety pin night. But we had a very interesting innovation, which has been done in Bogota and not in any other city yet. And this was to look at the bicycle tracks and do a safety audit of the bicycle tracks. And not only was it for mapping the bicycle tracks, but also to include the biking community. So this picture you can see the campaign, which was led by the city municipality, the Secretary of Women, and bikers were included, where they went out, did safety audits, collected images, um, sh- collected data across the nearly 200 kilometers of the bike paths of the city. And what we were able to do with this data was to, again, measure it, assess it, and do the safety audit to show where bike paths were not safe because there was either poor lighting, or because the bicycle stands were located at places where women could not access them. And this led, in fact, to changing in the way that the public space was designed. Again, we did a project in Hanoi, which is in Vietnam, a new metro line that was being built, which went through many public spaces, including three big universities, as well as directly into the city. And as you can see, the safety score inside the city, which is 10, 11, and 12, were very high, 4.5 out of 5. And as you move outward, the safety score goes down because of, less people on the streets, less crowd, and other elements. So the idea was really to, and this was very interesting. Again, we used the community of youth through a youth organization, ISEC, to encourage them to do the safety audits and give us the data. And this made a big difference because they were able to share exactly what made them feel unsafe. So really, I think, that I would like to share that the strength of Safety Pin is to take bottom-up data that users generate, that people generate, and mix that with these large data sets that we are able to generate through Safety Pin Night, through and provide GIS layers for the city government in order to encourage them and influence them to improve public spaces. And really, the impact can be measured in more women accessing public spaces, more women using it, better public spaces for all, because we do say that when you build safe public spaces for women, you build safe public spaces for all. And this is because when you have public spaces, because we know that our cities have been designed with a very masculine person in mind. So they're designed for men. It is men who have been designing for men. We've come to a point where are now women are asking for a seat at the table, whether it's the generation equality, whether it's which is really an important initiative to reach uh, voices of the youth, but also all other excluded groups, whether it's elderly, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's the disabled, whether it's migrants, So, we know that our cities need diversity. We know our cities are diverse, but they're not built with diversity in mind. So, how do we ensure that diversity is the principle that guides city planning, that guides city development? And Safety Pin is one tool in that has been used, that has been designed in order to ensure that more people are able to access public spaces. More women are able to share their own feeling about safety, about their safety in the city, and we really hope more individuals download the app, more city governments use it, and we look forward to partnerships using Safety Pin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kalpana, for your session. If any of the participants wants to write a comment or ask a question, please do it in the chat box or in the question and answers box. We can have a couple of minutes just waiting for any comment or question. Please, this is a moment.
I suppose it's a bit late for people. But I would really encourage all of you to go to our website. Um, Thank you, Melida. To go to our website, you can see all the reports, all the cities that we have collected data. We do have some data in Mexico City. So if you download the app, it's called My Safety Pin. You will be able to see what data there is, and you can put in more data. You can all do safety audits. It will be great if during the forum, no, it's My Safety Pin with an I. Can you I'll just spell it. Yeah, it's My Safety Pin. So this is, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Melida and all of you. We really do look forward to more people using the app and giving us feedback, So for example, if in the next few days during the Mexico Forum of the Gender Equality, Generation Equality, many women and men use the app and do safety audits, we can share that data and you'll be able to see it on the app, so you can see the updated information in the areas. I know a lot of this is virtual this year, unfortunately, but it's still, in your own neighborhoods, when you step out, it will be nice to see that. So as more and more people, if you remember last week, there was 2 weeks ago, there was a terrible murder of that young woman in London. And so we did find that after that in incident, we had more than 500 people download the My Safety Pin app in the city and use it. So it is really something that can be a tool in the hands of women to empower them, because we really feel it's very important for women to occupy public space. We shouldn't give up public space because of fear, and therefore this is a tool in that. Thank you so much for all of you, your appreciation.
Thank you so much, Kalpana, for your last words. And so we can close now the session. Thank you very much, and see you in the
Good evening
next
to all of you. Bye
forum.
bye.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.